Why that took so long? Gosh. Sorry, guys.
We are live.
Yay!
This is cool.
Okay. So how do we want to do this?
Well, we could just talk about each of the readings for, like, go through each of the readings, or we could just go through topics.
Okay, I think
Whichever is.
Yeah, we should go through the reading. Should we all talk about the one that like we didn't like do a jigsaw for first?
The R, what was it?
We got RS.
Like the 2 pages, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
When
Yeah,
I
we can
go
do
like
that.
this, can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing changed.
Okay. I was like going to a Word document. I didn't know. Okay. Let's see. Whoa. Why is it on me now?
No. I don't know. You're.
What the?
I don't know.
Okay.
Did it go to you for everyone?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm still seeing myself.
You're seeing yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Weird.
I don't know. It's recording us all, so that's good.
Yeah. Wait, is Tristan frozen for you guys?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
No.
Tristan.
Oh no.
Ah!
She must have some slow connection.
Yeah.
No, maybe she should refresh.
It might just be easier for her to like talk through speakerphone. Like on a phone.
Yeah, or even if she's just not on video.
Yeah.
Just turning her camera off.
On voice. Her picture shows her have a big old smile.
At least she's smiling, yeah. Is she back? Hello? Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Our
Maybe we should just do, because when she called you, I could hear her like perfectly.
Oh yeah, we could do that.
Poor Tristan. Or she could even do FaceTime too. Like
Yeah.
if she really...
Just do that. Okay. See. FaceTime. I just don't know how to like
just hold it there.
just my arm just get really tired. Okay.
Okay, so it's really weird because mine's still on Tristan's even though she's not even on here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this works. All right. Whoa. Now I'm at the front. Okay.
Yeah, well that works because you have 2 people over there.
Let's talk about stuff now.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, Joy, for that little dilemma. Okay. It's switching in and out. Okay. So looking at the RS reading, 2-pager. Why does it keep switching? Huh. Wow. Oh, maybe it is
We're
for like
struggling a little bit.
you're talking. That's what it's doing. It's detecting sound, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So the RS reading, I kind of talked a little bit about it in my post just because we were allowed to mention it if we wanted. I thought it was pretty straightforward with that was the school one, right? Rethinking schools. Yeah.
That was like the 2
Mhm.
pages of just like, oh, look at this for racism,
Yeah.
for these things for sexism.
Yeah. So I thought
Yeah.
it was interesting. Like it still was like saying to look at it with like looking at literature with the critical eye, but one thing it included that the other article didn't include was the sexism, which I thought was interesting, and I feel like that's still a pretty prevalent issue in a lot of children's book, with obviously having like, I don't know, like what comes to mind is like having like a mom at home doing all the cooking and cleaning and stuff, and the kids there with them, instead of it being, I don't know, reversed where the mom's at work all day and the dad's doing all of that, I guess, or not even it having to be a heterosexual family. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's still something that is not very diverse in children's literature.
I think the where it says like check illustrations for stereotypes, I found that really interesting because like I never thought to look at the pic. I was always thinking about critically analyzing the content, but it's true that like they could like have all the kids look the same but just have different skin colors, or like all the like if they're all African American they all look the same, or if they're all Asian they all look the same. And I like never thought about looking at the pictures before, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I really liked how that one had the different. Oh.
Hey.
There's some lag there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening?
I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, go, Corey.
Go ahead, Corey.
Okay. I was just gonna say I really liked how that one had the questions that prompted you to like think about the book more. Like instead of just saying this is what it shouldn't do, like they gave you questions to actually help you analyze what's going on in the book.
Oh, well, hold on. Let me take that. Would probably help. Sorry. Can you say that again, Corey?
Tristan,
I need to take my headphones out.
I was just saying I really liked how that just short 2-page reading had a lot of questions under each section to kind of help you ask yourself whether or not the book was, being authentically representative of a culture, especially since there are times when I wouldn't know. So those questions can help you like navigate that a bit.
Yeah, and I like went back and forth between whether or not I liked that one better or the one with its the reading globally when it had the evaluation, because that one was set up so easily to read, but it also didn't include, the gender roles and the sexism and the like those types of questions. It only focused on race, or I guess not race, but just like the authenticity and like the
Yeah.
I don't know. This one was just like it was easy to read, but it also was a little bit more wordy. And so I was going back and forth of whether or not like, to combine these, or like if I was looking at a book, whether or not I would look at this one or the other one. And
something that I was kind of like curious about though when reading all of these, but specifically this one, is like
Oh. Sorry.
is
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
It's fine, it's fine.
Okay. I'm turning you up.
What I was wondering though is like there are stories though where the mom is gonna work at home and the dad's not, or there are stories where the like kind of stereotype is gonna be true, and like what happens when it's those stories, do you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah, well, it's kind of like The Other Side, like the book that we listened to, because it addressed the stereotypes that were happening at that time and like still happen. Like a bad book by any means, like it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So when you are like critically analyzing those types of books, you can still read them. Like they're still good books. They do have that stereotype, but that's something that you like talk about. right? Like the students are supposed to be analyzing that as well. Like they see where the stereotypes are.
Yeah, and you have to judge
Right.
whether or not your students are old enough to be able to do that. So if you're like with a kindergarten class, they're probably not going to understand that concept yet. So you just want to like avoid books with stereotypes. But if you know you're upper elementary going into middle school, then yeah, you can start prompting those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Like,
and I also think it's too like you're balancing like the types like of the books like the other side where the stereotypes are present compared to the books that I don't know, I can't think of one offhand, but just like the books that do have, you know, the social norms or the stereotypes not in.
yeah.
Okay, what am I saying? Like, yeah, so like the mom's maybe at work and the dad's at home compared to. I don't know. I guess that would just be more of a balance of.
But with like the African American family stories, for instance, like The Other Side, during that time period, it was like whites and blacks were separated. So that's not a stereotype, that's just what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Right.
what it said. Yeah.
I think it would be stereotyping though if they like showed that all of the black children on the one side of the fence looked and behaved the same, and all of the white children on Annie's side of the fence looked and behaved the same. Like, just because they're separated doesn't mean they're stereotyping. They're just like acknowledging something that was real at the time. But if they all like looked and behaved the same, then that'd be more of a stereotype.
Yeah, and I like kind of wrote about that in my post about how like even though like all the girls on the one side of the fence, they were all definitely like individuals. Like they looked different, they acted different.
Yeah.
Like they didn't all look and act the exact same just because they were on one side of the fence.
I found what was interesting in The Other Side also was that they didn't like, I was glad to see that they didn't stereotype like in that time, if you're looking in that time frame, like they weren't like depicting Annie as like the one that looked really well off, and they didn't. Like they had like good clothes and a good home. Like when you saw Clover in her home, like it was a good home, and it wasn't like being stereotyped to like that they had no money and that they had no like
That's
good
true,
place
yeah.
to live. So that stood out to me when I read it, like that like in that time period they didn't stereotype what was expected of like African Americans to live in what type of environment.
Yeah.
Well, and I also thought it was interesting too because they showed Clover's house, but they didn't show Annie's house, like or like the inside of it. They just saw her like in a rain, in a puddle, or. It seemed to me like it was almost proving like that there wasn't a stereotype there because they showed an aspect of a story that possibly could have a stereotype.
Yeah, that's true.
You want to talk about the next reading?
I mean, we could talk about while we're on the topic, we could talk about like the fence and like, I don't know, just more of the other side and everything, just because we're kind of going that way.
I just think like the fence is obviously just like that representation of the separation between the blacks and whites during that time. I found it interesting how like at the beginning, or like when Annie was like sitting on the fence, and then Clover kind of came over and she's like, "Oh, do you want to sit on the fence?" And then she was like, "Oh, well, I'm not allowed to cross it." She's like, "Yeah, well, I'm not either, but no one said anything about sitting on it." So I found that interesting because they're like pushing the boundaries that were there without like not following the rules.
Yeah, and eventually they became like comfortable enough to like go to the other side and like be all together. And I think Joy like specifically brought up too like how the fence wasn't necessary to be there because they were all together.
Yeah. But it was like a little bit of a process. Like it didn't just all happen at once.
Right.
Well, yeah, because that was after everything happened with like the mom saying like, "No, that's just how it is," and them walking on the streets and everything. So it was just like a that I think there's definitely a big build up to it, because I don't know, I think that, like, you know, children have this curiosity, and even though if you tell them, you know, that's just how it is, they're still going to be curious about it. That doesn't just go away with, you know, they're like, oh, okay, like there's some acceptance to it, but there's also more of a, like, okay, well, I'm still curious about this. Like, you know, that she wanted to be friends with Annie, so she was going to try to be friends with Annie. So
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, sorry, go, Corey.
Something I was curious about as well in reading that was what would have happened if they had all gone to Annie's side of the fence. Like, when Annie came to their side, Clover's mom was like pleased. She was like, oh, I see you've made a new friend. But I feel like if they had all gone to Annie's side of the fence, it might not have been so well received, because Annie's mom might have had some of those racist stereotypical feelings like inside her.
Yeah. I didn't really think about that, but that's a really good point. I mean, her mom wasn't really present really in the story much, except when they were walking, right? And her mom didn't say anything, so we don't know anything about Annie's parents or her house or
That's true.
anything. But we do know that she was told not to cross the fence. So yeah, I'm assuming that would have probably have been the case. Like, if the other girls, especially because there was like more of them than just like Annie.
Yeah.
I don't know. It probably would have caused problems with Annie's family.
well, do you think if that happened, then the author would have taken it that way, or would it have been like they're accepting of, I don't know, it just seemed like the author was very, you know, avoiding all stereotypes, or like, I don't know, breaking those social norms. And so I wonder if it was to go the other way, that she would have gone with the way of, you know, it wasn't okay to go to the white side of the fence, or if it would have been okay to.
I think that the author made a very specific decision in having Annie cross over to their side of the fence. So I feel like if the other girls were to cross over, I don't think it would have been the same. I think, because then why wouldn't she have done that?
Well, there was also more of Clover's friends too. There was only Annie. Annie was the only white.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
This is
so it's like,
this is making
go ahead.
of something. I think you wrote it, Abby, in your post. You were talking about the illustration of Annie helping Clover up onto the fence, and how was that your post?
I talked about
that was him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Annie is, because she's the white child in the story, she still has that little bit more power and the ability to do what she wants and go where she wants. So I think that's why she was the one to cross over, because like she's probably not going to get in as much trouble.
Yeah, she has that like overarching privilege to just be carefree, and it kind of goes into also like when she is playing in the puddle and everything, and just like her presence and everything, and how Clover wanted to be that way and eventually got to that point, but it took her a lot of time, because me making an assumption, she probably needed to, like, she hadn't expressed that before in a way that Annie always was able to, because like on a daily basis, Annie was really carefree, and Clover had to like kind of warm up to that idea of like being able to feel that way. And then it eventually happened, you know, later in the story.
Well, and I also thought it was interesting too how Clover's mom was like, oh, I see you made a new friend. Like, that was a very, I think also another specific decision to include that, because I mean, the mom really wasn't that present in most of the story. And then except for saying like, that's how things are. And, oh, you made a new friend.
Yeah. And don't stare.
Yeah. And don't stare.
Like, I don't know. I just think I was kind of surprised by that, honestly, because it seemed throughout the story that it was kind of like the mom, like, wanted her to like stay with them, you know, like, don't stare at them. Like, don't cross over the fence. Like, I was surprised that the mom was like, oh, it looks like you made a friend. Like, she must have seen that girl every day sitting on the fence, too. Like,
yeah, I was really surprised that she was okay with it, because I feel like, I don't know, my perception of it in like that time in history was, you know, both sides, whether you were white or black, would say, no, don't, you know, make friends with those other people. Or, you know, if they did, they were both in trouble instead.
Yeah, it kind of shows too, like the difference between like the innocence of like children and what they have compared to like the adults and what they're like, I don't know, pressing on them with those ideas. Like it, like through the story, there's like this battle of like the children just being them innocent selves and like wanting to just play, and then them having that conflict of like what moms are expecting them to do and like follow in the social norms. So it's kind of like cool to see that like if you keep that, I don't know, that child innocence look on like society, it can really like go in a, I don't know, forward way compared to what the parents are pressing on them. And yeah, I just found that interesting, the contrast between the two.
Yeah, and I also, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that's an overarching theme in a lot of children's books, is that like children are just more open-minded and like they don't have all those ideas yet. Like they haven't been like, I don't know. They still are more open-minded and willing to do things that others don't think are what you should do.
Well, and yeah, just going off of that, I think that it, you know, telling the kids, you know, having this like adult hierarchy, that it telling kids like, oh, that's just how it is, and not giving them like a specific, you know, reasoning, I think is one that adults are trying to protect. You know, that maybe not innocence, but that understanding of the world, I guess, that they see. But I also like talked about how I think it also harms the kids because their curiosity can be suppressed in that way. You know, that's just how it is. And they're like, you know, some kids will just be like, oh, okay. Like, and then I think that starts to decrease your curiosity so that when you become an adult, you're no longer, you know, questioning, you know, why. And I just, I think that phrase or that broad explanation of that's just how it is, or because I said so, or
I just feel like that stops from people being critical thinkers, because like even for instance when we take like our ELED math classes, for instance, all those stuff that we know how to do from elementary school, we just learned it because that's how you were supposed to do it. Like we didn't learn really like how it worked until now. Like it was just, well, this is what you do and that's how it works, and like when you think about it, that's just the process you go through. And I feel like that kind of goes over a lot of like parts of life, and like what you were saying, Abby, is it stops people from being critical thinkers because they just accept that things are how they are and they don't like try to fix it or change it or ask why they're like that.
Right. It like takes somebody else to challenge you or somebody else to like force you into questioning other things. Like I feel like as adults, like when someone is told that something is like that for no apparent reason, like that's just how it is, that they no longer will critically think on their own or question on their own, and it takes somebody else or some other event to do that for them instead of being like a child for your entire life in terms of that curiosity.
Kids always asking why.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like we barely ask. I don't know, for me, I feel like I don't ask why enough.
Oh no. Oh, I for sure don't.
Well, maybe a good, I'm trying to think of our muddy questions here. Maybe a good muddy question around this would be, how can we do that with literature in our classrooms? Like, how can we make sure that we're remembering to ask those important why questions, and that we're not just
the kids to do that as well?
Yeah, and not just giving them because it's the way it is kinds of answers. Like we don't want to stomp out that curiosity.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good, because it's like I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer to it. I think it's just based off your experience too. Yeah, I think.
Someone writing that down.
Yeah, I am. So how?
And the time.
I'm writing 9:34 a.m. and then I'll figure it out based on when we started.
Cool.
Does the Google Hangout not have like a...
It's not showing like where we're at for time. It's just live broadcasting.
Yeah.
It'll eventually show like a complete. But we started somewhere around 9:10, I think. So.
Yeah, I think it was like 25 minutes probably or so.
So how can we encourage asking those why questions and when, like for our future classroom, or
like while using literature or like based off of literature?
Okay.
I was also wondering too, and I don't know if this is necessarily a muddy question or not, but I was also wondering, like with the book, like The Other Side, you know, that has a lot of like big topics that are part of our history and obviously still prevalent today. But I was wondering, like, what kind of extension activities would be most beneficial to continue to plant those seeds of like awareness and understanding, you know, because I feel like you could take this book and you could read it and you could teach them like, okay, back in 1960s or whatever, or 50s, you know, the blacks and whites were segregated, and you could teach that, but I don't know if that would necessarily plant the seeds that we're like hoping to.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be an extension activity. Didn't really think about that. You could do something with the fence.
Yeah.
Maybe having the kids, I don't know. I always like the idea of having the kids like act it out, you know, because then it gets them moving and thinking differently. But also, like, it makes it easy to have like, oh, all these kids go over here, all these kids go over there. Well, like, you know, how'd you choose those kids? How'd you?
Right, because then you get into like the stereotyping within your own classroom just to represent this story in a way that is different. Like, I don't know. So I don't know how I would necessarily do that. Like if I was to teach this book right now and like, you know, maybe do a unit on it, or it's part of a unit, but I just didn't know what, like, and even for the future books that we read, like what extension activities, like how do you pick those so that it's the most effective?
I think we should definitely make that a muddy question because I think Joy will have a lot of really good ideas.
I wrote it down.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to put two muddy questions back to back, but that was just like one of my...
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the ideas that I have is just you could connect it to another story that might be a real life story instead of a fictional story. So like a biography of somebody else who pushed the boundaries and crossed the fence, so to speak.
I like that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I also think, I mean, we're just like such in a sensitive time. I mean, we can go back to talking about, I don't remember what chapter it was that talked about the, you know, parents being unhappy. Was that part of, I don't remember. But the, you know, just like pleasing everyone and how you can't necessarily with all of your book choices.
Oh, yeah.
And just like how we're in like a sensitive time of.
Yeah, that the second, it was like chapter 8 of the article. Where it talked about like what you can do in your district and with your classroom to like inform the parents to where they're, because you probably will still have parents that are like, what are you doing? Because who knows why they're not really like sure of this idea. If they, I don't know, they just ask questions. And so like I really liked that part of the article where it talked about like how you can talk to your parents and prepare them and prepare your students to like help explain like what they're learning about to the parents and like how it benefits them as a whole and to move forward.
Right.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about like the history of children's books because I am not gonna lie, I never thought about the fact that like children's books were not I never thought about that. Like, there was a time when kids were just treated like small adults. Like, they didn't have specific things for them as children. And that was, like, honestly really shocking to me. I, like, never thought about it before.
Yeah.
I really liked how they broke, just like, I really liked how they broke each section of that chapter into the centuries and not necessarily like the types of books. Just because I don't know, I think that it really has changed throughout, and it just made such a, I mean, they went through what, like 5 or 6 centuries worth of, and so I mean, that's like a ton of time, and so much happened during that time, but they really just made it simple and easy to follow with each of the.
And yet the children's books that we kind of today weren't really around until like 1980s, 70s.
Yeah, like 60s too, I guess.
Well, there were earlier books that, I don't know about you guys, but like those novels that they were talking about that were originally intended for adults but adopted by a lot of kids, and then some really early picture books that probably, if we went back, might have some stereotypes in them from the time period, but like are still considered classics. And basically every title they listed, I was like, I have that at home. I read that all the time as a kid. That was my first chapter book. Like,
But a lot of them are like really different. Like, for instance, all the Grimm fairy tales, those have been like changed so to be more appropriate for children because they're really scary. So it's like, I don't know, the stories have been changed to make them more, like, it's weird to think that those stories that we think of as children's stories were originally created for adults.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I don't remember when it was, but when they like they went back, okay, let me look real quick. Because they went back to like the early or like the late 1800s and like early 1900s, I think, and reintroduced titles and all of the, you know, like, and they like redid those books so that they fit into like today. Oh yeah, it was in the 21st century. Yeah, so early went back and like did, you know, like the restructuring of Alice in Wonderland and like all those books so they fit into today's look, I guess. And
like my thing kind of talked about like the way that the market kind of changed for books, because originally children's books were like only found in libraries, but then they changed to be like in bookstores and stores where you would buy them. And when they did this, they like became way more heavily reliant on illustrations, because like that's what catches like the consumer and the buyer's attention. And I thought that was really interesting because I like thought about when I walk into a bookstore, like I automatically go to the books that I think have like the nicest illustrations because that's what catches my eye. And it's like, just like, I don't know, you really have to critically look at those books. Like, just because they look nice or they're like a nice story doesn't mean that they're culturally relevant.
Yeah, and the whole like bookstore library thing also had me thinking like about like the whole setup between the two. Like, obviously libraries are like free access for books and bookstores are not. And so I just was thinking about that relationship and how, like, I don't know what kind of money that libraries get to purchase books, but maybe they don't have the selection that a bookstore might, to where they might not have the latest like culturally aware books to add to their shelves. And so it just made me think about that. And also,
well, and it's also like they talked about how a lot of bad books get a lot of recognition because of like the celebrity.
Yeah.
And so,
and even with like authors and like thinking about like authenticity and like having to critically analyze authors, like it just makes me wonder too, like what are these authors that are trying to like, I don't know, be culturally aware and like incorporate that into their own publishing of children's literature, and like how good is it? Like how, I don't know like who's really out there right now that has like is well off enough to like have recognition of culturally relevant books and that they have the proper information to make those. I guess that didn't really make a lot of sense, but it just, I don't.
Well, I think it's like just few and far between compared to the really popular authors.
Yeah. That's
you know,
what
they
it,
published one 20 years ago and now, you know, and it was a huge hit type of thing. And now they get recognition for every book that they publish and they get all these awards just because of their one other book.
right.
One other problem I saw in with that whole dynamic of who's able to publish and who gets recognition is when it was talking about how all the publishing houses kept buying each other out, and now they're like mega companies and they care about making money more than quality. So it was talking about how they have like Barnes and Noble's reps sit in on meetings when they're choosing which books to publish. And it kind of gave me some insight. You know, I've heard things about how people are like, oh, all the smaller publishing houses are disappearing and it's such a tragedy. Like, all of these new authors are never going to get their names out there. And reading that really helped me understand why, because like these, especially multicultural authors that are trying to like get these multicultural texts off the ground, probably aren't going to be selected in those big meetings because their books might not be expected to make money, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I feel like most of society, hopefully not, but I feel like the reality of it is that most society isn't getting, I don't know, experience like we are in this LLC program and like being culturally aware and stuff. Like that's not the mindset that the majority has, and so they're not like looking like we are for culturally relevant texts for our children to make them more aware of multicultural and everything.
Well, and I was also thinking about too how, oh, Tristan, you can go ahead.
No, you go, because mine changes the topic a little bit.
Okay, well, I was just thinking about how, you know, we're in, you know, Bellingham, Washington, and we're learning, you know, through this LLC major about these, you know, books and everything. But I was thinking about, you know, what if you have a student who moves from the other side of the country or from a different part of the world, and, you know, their experience with books before will be different than the books that we have in our classroom, most likely. And it talked about how a lot of the books that we have were based off of the European books, like just, you know, back in history. And so I was just like, it made me wonder, like, how, you know, what, I guess I'm just curious of like what other books would be like, you know, in Florida or in Texas or in, you know, what, based on where I mean, it's still the United States, but the United States is so big that there's so many different cultures and so many different, you know, languages in terms of like dialect and everything, and social norms within different areas of our country, that, you know, a kid who's in 5th grade moving to Washington will have a totally different experience with, like, I think, because of the different social norms and what books are put into their classrooms in a different area. And just like, you know, that just like their way of thinking is, I shouldn't say there, but like, you know, different areas have different ways of thinking based on their different norms.
Yeah.
So like, you know, having a student have those ideas will affect, like, you know, the dynamic of the classroom and all that. I don't know. So it's like a random curiosity, I guess, of what it would be like to be in a classroom somewhere else and what those books would look like, I guess.
Taking that a little like broader, I wonder like how it is in other countries. Like, I don't know. Do they focus on culturally relevant material the way like we are learning about it? Like in, I don't know, Europe?
Well, when I went to Finland, it was, you know, they were a lot more, even though their population is not as diverse as ours, they did a lot of kind of like reader's theater, those types of books where you would act it out and stuff, like you would tell a story through it. But they did focus on the different books, but they also, you know, focused on, you know, learning about other people's religions. And I just felt like it was more culturally sound there than what we present just in books, if that makes sense.
That's interesting.
But I mean, that's one country, so I have no idea what.
I don't know. I wonder if Joy would have any information on that. Just because
Yeah.
so much on,
Well, I mean, she used to teach in Texas, so.
What?
What?
I mean, she used to teach in Texas, Joy did.
Yeah,
So.
we should make that a muddy question because I'm curious, and I know she would have that kind of information.
Right.
How should I word it?
What?
Maybe just like how do
her video
like,
that we watched.
what did you say, Tristan?
Oh, the video that we were watching where she read to us the other side. She was in Texas at that time, so
Yeah.
she was obviously reading like that kind of culturally relevant material to her students in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I guess maybe then our question is more of like, do those books find the way into the classroom? And I guess it's just maybe a harsh reality of like, do those books find their way into the classroom? Like pre-service teachers are not exposed to them before.
Okay, yeah, I like that question.
Because it's like, we're exposed to them now, but maybe somebody at Gonzaga or even at UW or Eastern or something, they're not exposed to having culturally relevant books to this degree.
Yeah, even the people that aren't in the LLC major who go to are in Woodring with us, aren't exposed to this either.
Right.
True.
So it's like then their classrooms would look different in literacy than ours would.
Yeah.
Which
I find super interesting.
Wow, that's a good point. And yeah, like I wonder what is out there. Like we have the Children's Literature Conference, which I feel like is, I mean, because it's hosted by Western, it's really like striving to have that in multicultural books and like multicultural authors even, but is that going on everywhere else? Like I don't know.
Well, and
Yeah.
a couple of our texts were talking about how to choose good books, and they're talking about how a good place to start is to look for award winners because those likely won the award because they are authentic and the author knew what they were doing and they have good illustrations and stuff. So you would hope that teachers across the nation and around the globe are still looking at those award-winning books and going, okay, this is the kind of book I should be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, and that goes to like the chapter that talked about the need for multicultural literature. And when I started reading that, and I wrote this in my post, but it's like when I started reading it, it was just like, okay, yeah. Like we've heard this 1,000 times as LLC majors. Like, yes, we need diversity in our classroom. Yes, we need all of this stuff. But it made, like, as I was reading it, that really disappeared. Like that, my instant, like, or initial idea of like, okay, yeah, I know what this is going to be about, because it really, that article did open my eyes to like really, really why we need multicultural literature and like judging multicultural literature.
Yeah.
Because you do judge it, and you need to judge it, and you.
I was curious what you guys thought about, I forget which article it was, but one of them was talking about how some people think that you shouldn't like write or illustrate about a certain culture if you are not like from that culture or if you haven't experienced it, whereas others said that if you like do the research and learn about it and try to understand it and like become immersed in that culture, then it's okay. Like, what do you guys think about that? Because there were some books where like she read them to like the book that was based in Haiti, and then she read them to teachers in Haiti, and they were like, no, that was like really inaccurate and
yeah
culture.
Mm.
But like that person, that author had done the research on their culture when she wrote that book.
Well, what comes to my mind is technology, and I don't know if this is actually really relevant, but I just thought of technology in the way that, you know, you want to, like in this day and age, you can just like give a piece of technology to a student and be like, here, you learn this and you teach me about it. Maybe if you could apply that same kind of concept to literature of just like, okay, here's a book, let's deconstruct it, let's like learn about this together and not necessarily have to know everything about it or be super, you know, I don't know if that would be appropriate or not.
I don't get what you're saying. Like, how does that have
like,
to do with, like, if you're an author writing about a culture, if you like are from that culture versus just researching it?
Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I thought you were talking about a teacher implementing a book they didn't necessarily know about.
Oh, no,
like
an actual author, like someone writing about it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Sorry, that was unclear.
I think your comment is
kind
of relevant though, Abby, because you were talking about how technology is making information a lot more readily available.
Right.
That's still true for authors. Like, there's so much that they can learn just using resources available online and stuff. But I still think after all the readings that we've done, I still think to get that true authenticity, like having an advisor or somebody who is from the culture to help write the book is really important. Because otherwise you'll never really know, like, that person, maybe they're not a trained author, so they can't be the ones to write the story and share their experiences themselves. But if they're advising you on what is culturally authentic and accurate and what isn't, then I think an author could write a really successful story even if they aren't from the culture.
Yeah.
I think it's just like a fine line of finding that accurate information, because there's so much that you can just get the false ones too.
Yeah, I guess I kind of feel that way. Just that I don't know if you could ever fully like do it as if someone that's like born and raised and a part of that culture and like identifies with that culture. But I mean, you sure can
I would
try.
never want to risk it.
But no, I wouldn't either.
I
wouldn't have that confidence or like certainty that
I'd be so scared of doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But then you can go back to like the publishing, and like, I mean, if you look at the authors, a lot of published famous authors are, you know, white males, and or white.
But then if you look at it and you're like, okay, so you're reading this culturally relevant book, it's this, like, let's say you have a student or students, let's take the story of where she goes to Haiti, for example, and she's reading this book about Haiti to Haitian people. Even if it was all relevant and accurate, it being written by like a white male or white female, would that change the way that they like accept the book? Because it's not written by someone of their culture. It's just like someone acting like they know about it.
Like just the fact that they know that it's not someone from their own culture, that they automatically...
Like, can they relate to it still, even if it wasn't written by someone who actually, like, is from that culture?
Yeah. I mean, my initial idea of when you were saying that was that we will be teaching students who are not of our culture or of our race.
That's true.
And that, you know, that like they will be learning from us and we will be learning from them. Yeah. And never going to be that equal, I totally understand you type of thing, because you're different. And so I think there is an equal balance of, you know, of respect, maybe is what the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, there's never going to be an equal playing field of understanding in that way.
I think this kind of connects to something I remember reading in the Reading Globally one too, where it's really important to always bring it back to that shared global human culture. And like when there's times where you're teaching something that you don't know as much about, or where you're having your students read about a new culture that they don't know about, having them look for those mirrors, the places where we all connect across cultures and we all have like shared experiences or like feelings that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole mirrors and windows thing. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, that's an awesome way to incorporate that. I mean, because I had never heard of that, mirrors and windows, maybe in a different form, but I mean, that specific, before this. And I think that would be so cool to, you know, teach your students how to do from a young age. And I think it was, like chapter maybe 15, I think. And it talked about the xenophobia, the mistrust or fear of other people that are different than you. And just like that really stood out to me because, you know, it talked about how you can plant the seeds to avoid that type of behavior and that type of mindset. Like there's no age that's too early.
Yeah.
So I think that the mirrors and windows is just another extension. And maybe that's a great extension activity for a lot of books. Windows activity.
I don't remember what reading it was that talked about like when you like show like through like children's literature books that students can relate to that are like part of their culture and how it like, I don't know, builds up their self-esteem and like how we were talking about earlier about having that equal level of respect. Like I think it's just really important like as teachers to like really show that you're gleaning like from your students and like being like I don't know, giving them another reason to be like proud of the culture that they come from and show that they can teach us as their teachers so much about themselves and like add or bring that to the classroom. It's just really cool and important.
Yeah, and it just like I think it also is that goes back to like the balance act of like what type of literature you have in your classroom, or maybe that you read to your classroom. Because I don't know, I think now, I mean, there's such a huge location of books that, you know, ever since like the 1950s where they had all those grants, and like from there just like continuously increased with the number of books that are being published. I think that we have so many books to choose from that it's going to be difficult to choose which ones into our classroom, because you have not only like the ones on race, you have the ones where it has, you know, a family that is not necessarily, you know, that is you could say outside the norm, or, you know, that they're publishing all these books that don't have the I guess like old consistency to it.
Yeah.
I kind of wrote about this in my post about how when I'm looking at all that different criteria for culturally relevant material, how I'm probably going to have to like do a lot of research. And I never really thought about doing that before, because I was just like, oh, if this is a good book, then it's a good book. But now I realize I'm going to have to do a lot more research on if the material is authentic and accurate before, you know, reading it to the kids and creating a whole lesson on it.
I remember reading that part of your post, and one question that I had or was curious about was, maybe it's another muddy question, but like where's like does Joy know of like a good resource to get that type of information, and like is that
I don't know.
Like suffice
That's a good
enough?
question. I was just kind of thinking, like kind of what Abby was saying earlier about technology, is that we have a lot easier access to that type of information now with, you know, the internet. We can look up stuff for different cultures, and I don't know. It'd be nice if we had a specific like if Joy knew of a specific resource that would.
Yeah, that's like, I don't know, just like that has accurate information, because you always, you know, internet, you never really do know what you're reading and if it is accurate. And so like in doing that research, like I think it's also really important to make sure that you're finding like accurate information, because that just creates a whole other mess if you're, I don't know, teaching yourself completely wrong information about other cultures. So
it was interesting too. It really focused on the reading globally one. Really focused on, I guess, and the other one did too. But really focused on like the author's background and everything, which we've talked quite a bit about already. But I thought that was, you know, I had never, you know, I feel like right now I go to pick a book out and I'm just like skimming through the pages, looking at the story, looking at the pictures. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. Like, you know, looks good, but never really looked at, you know, who wrote it and why they wrote it and where they come from and their background and
yeah, and where they got this information, because that article was talking a lot about this author said that they wrote this because of this, and you know, I never look at the author ever. I never considered it.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, me neither.
This makes me think of, you know, those American cultural studies classes we have to take. I took one just last quarter that was about the American Indians and their contemporary issues. And one of the things that our professor had us do was, with every article that we researched, we had to talk about the author and their resources and kind of show that we did the work to find out whether or not they were credible.
Yeah. That was my first experience too, doing that, was in that class, and like, oh wow, this is like a huge part of like your research and like choosing what you want to use in that.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, you see a book with a, you know, gold sticker on it for award, and you're like, oh, there it goes. Like, that's a perfect book to use. And you don't necessarily like look more into it and actually like learn about why they wrote
That's why I really like how in this class she's giving us books, and like originally going into it, I was like, oh, all of these books are going to be great books for my future library. But then she's like, oh no, like you need to look at them critically and decide, because some of them might not be. And I like that because it gives a lot of practice.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Let's see what.
Did we talk about?
I feel like we covered everything pretty well.
Yeah, I think we covered it.
Yeah, I would say that we definitely touched on every reading.
Do we have any questions?
Oh yeah, we've got 2, 3, possibly 4. Yeah. But we definitely have those first 3 that we talked about. So.
Cool.
Yeah. We're about an hour, so I think I don't think we'd have to force it if we.
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I gotta get ready for work.
Oh yeah. Glad we got this all to work out okay.
Yeah. And hopefully we can meet in person next time.
Yeah, that's a little bit easier.
I'll be in town next week.
Me too. Sweet. Okay.
All right.
Well, goodbye.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right.
You too.
Bye.